Hello everybody and welcome back to ChäoS. So let me go ahead and get my timer started and we can go ahead and begin. I first became buddies with you through hanging out with Remy. I believe this was a red line. Okay, and I don't know why all of a sudden the background.
と同じで、リミも物好きだからよ。ニートのお前を気にかけてやってるのは、世界広しといえど、俺とリミぐらいだぜ。それは言い過ぎか。
The words I heard from the other side of the phone, not one of them felt real to me because I had zero memory of anything they were referring to. I couldn't acknowledge that such a past existed. The Masumi-esque somebody was talking about a story, not about the past, for the past could succeed in forming only with the support of one's memories.
っていうか、リミってマジで女っ気ないよな。これはあいつには言うなよ。
君は誰だ？
おいおい、マジでおかしくなったか。俺のことまで忘れたわけか。ゲームやりすぎ。
Unable to stand it any longer, I single-handedly ended the call. I realized that without my noticing it, my breathing had grown frenzied. The sweat that had been oozing from my forehead since before not only showed no signs of stopping, it was starting to increase. Enough to go dripping from my chin down to my feet.
たく、汗びっしょりだよ。
Looking rather worried about me, the demon girl quietly offered me a handkerchief. A pretty, patternless handkerchief, colored a faint vermilion. There was a slight floral scent to it. Instead of taking it, I attempted to somehow keep my composure and organize my thoughts about my current circumstances. But it didn't go too well. My endlessly suspicious emotions spun down into a whirlwind of disorder.
で、大地はなんて？
After sighing in what sounded like light disappointment as she put away her handkerchief, the demon girl asked me this with a triumphant expression. It was the attitude of someone who'd known the answer from the start. I couldn't afford to answer her. What was she? An ordinary classmate of mine? Or a monster? I couldn't tell. Maybe I was the one who'd gone crazy. If you took the ChäoS Shogun into consideration, it was hard to discard the possibility that someone other than myself was controlling me. Or else only my memories of this demon girl, of the girl called Sakihata Rimi, had by some accident been knocked clean out of me. Whatever the case, I didn't understand myself. Was it memory loss? Somnambulism? Something else altogether?
大丈夫？体、辛いならソファーで横になる？
The demon girl spoke to me kindly. Be careful of kind words. Anyone who acts nice to a creepy otaku like me must have an ulterior motive. I shook my head to show her my refusal and raised my face with all my strength. Sweat got on my eyes, making my vision blurry. The demon girl's face was closer than I'd expected. What color did she hold in those eyes of hers?
なんで
何何？
ここにいる？
なんでって、タクに会いに来たんだよ。もしかして、勝手に部屋に入ったこと、怒ってる？でもそれは、タクがちっとも返事してくれないから悪いんだよ。結構長い時間、ノックしてたんだから。
Well, at least what you claim to be a pretty long time. I thrust the borrowed cell phone back at her. As I watched the demon girl timidly take it back, I asked her again.
なんで？
ん？今度は何？
ここにいる。
What was her reason for coming to visit me? If she'd come to kill me, she would have acted on her intentions long ago. Yet, why hasn't she done anything?
ああ、ここに来た理由？ね。
The demon girl reached in her bag and pulled out a one-sheet printout.
はい、進路希望のプリント。 持ってきてあげたの。
Without quite meaning to, I accepted it from her. Certainly, it had future aspirations questionnaire written on it with blank fields for up to 3 entries. Was that really it? Only that.
帰ってよ。
I didn't want to get involved. I mustn't get involved with 3D girls. This was a trap. Don't listen. This wasn't reality. It was a game. On top of that, full of bugs, because there were too many contradictions. It didn't hold together as a story.
僕に関わらないでよ。
If you don't mean to kill me, then please let me be. I belong to myself. Some me that wasn't me might have been pals with Sakihata Rimi, but that had no connection with my current self. Holding my head, I closed my heart. I started to tremble, dreaming that a girl called Sakihata Rimi had never been there in the first place. After some time, I heard the sound of the door opening, telling my ears that the demon girl had left. So if I'd let last part go for another 6 minutes, we would have hit the end of that delusion. But honestly, like I said, it was already sort of starting to drag a little bit. Only the pale light of the PC monitor floated faintly in the middle of the pitch-black room. It reflected a screensaver of Seira, a character from Bloodtoon the Animation. In this container house, which a girl called Sakihata Rimi had visited half a day earlier, there could now be found solely the form of its owner, Nishijo Takumi. The time was already nearing 5 in the morning. It was Takumi's daily habit to play online games until dawn, then sleep like a log on his sofa. Now, too, Takumi was lying on the sofa in an uncomfortable-looking position. He didn't use his bed to sleep in. Though he possessed a proper bed, the reason he didn't sleep there was because it had been monopolized by the manga volumes, CDs, and so forth that had piled up atop it. In the period when he avoided cleaning because it would be too much of a bother, his bed had gradually transformed into a type of shelving. Henceforth, he began using the 2-seat sofa as his sleeping space. A painful-sounding moan spilled from Takumi's mouth. Perhaps he was having a nightmare. His entire body was sweating, and his closed eyelids trembled. His expression twisted agonizingly, and as he tossed and turned over and over, he came close to falling off the sofa. Suddenly, lying on his back, Takumi opened his eyes abnormally wide. His eyes were thoroughly bloodshot, and furthermore, his eyeballs themselves were twitching. Without a single blink, he lumbered to his feet, and drifted, swaying over to his PC. Refraining from sitting down, he moved the mouse while standing. The screensaver disappeared, and his desktop filled the monitor. Illuminated by the monitor's pallid light, Takumi's expression was horribly empty. His body wavered from side to side. Drool hung down from his half-open mouth. His figure, that was that of a prototypical sleepwalker. As though delirious, Takumi started up his net browser and opened the main page of @channel. The movements of his body were lactastical, but he showed no hesitation in selecting threads related to New Gen in the breaking news board. In total, they numbered approximately 60, and Takumi opened them one by one in order from the top down. And while gazing at the monitor, he began touch typing. He repeated this in each of the 60 existing threads. The letters he typed were few, but all of them formed the same sentence. Whose eyes are those? And back to the hospital. The next day I headed to the hospital first thing in the morning. I hadn't been able to confirm it the last time I came here, but today I would definitely get them to tell me I was normal. Dr. Takashino would remember me. I'd revealed that I was Nishijo, your patient up until 4 years ago, and I'd get to hear all kinds of things from him. I wasn't the crazy one. The demon girl and Masumi were. The doctor would surely tell me so. This hospital opened at 8 in the morning, somewhat earlier than regular hospitals, which is why I had come exactly in time for opening hours, but the sofas in the lobby were already filled with seated old people. Why? Even though the hospital had barely opened for the day, Why were there so many people here? It's unfair to get a head start. Come on, time, like you're supposed... Or what? Come on, time, like you're supposed to. Inwardly insulting them, I had no option left but to wait. After an hour of waiting, I found myself regretting that I didn't make an appointment. But immediately afterward, they called my name, and I was relieved at the fact that I hadn't been forced to wait as long as last week. By the time the one waiting for me in the by the way, the one waiting for me in the examining room they brought me to wasn't Dr. Takashina, but instead an unfamiliar white-haired old man. I don't know why I had a hard time reading that.
高階先生は
Upon my growing perplex, the nurse standing in attendance behind him, what was her name again? Hazuki, answered with an apologetic expression.
高階先生はもういません。
Ruh-roh. Not here anymore?
もういないというか、過労がたたって先週末に倒れてしまわれてね。今週はそれでずっと休みだよ。
Wait, had Dr. Takashina really collapsed from fatigue?
陰謀だ。悪魔女の陰謀だ。
西条さん
She definitely put poison in his food, or sent him a threatening letter, or done something else to drive him into a psychological corner. She was trying to isolate me, make me helpless. I had no intention of letting anyone besides Dr. Takashina examine me, so instead of undergoing a checkup, I left the hospital as though I were fleeing it. And then made our way back home.
くそー。
Leaning against the fence surrounding the roof, I stared vaguely up at the sky. The skies of Shibuya were drab, and it would be hard to call them clear.
病院にはもう行かない方がいい。
The demon girl's dragnet was tightening. Maybe I had nowhere left to run. Maybe even the detectives I met yesterday had in truth been fakes, the demon girl's cronies, and they'd been testing me. Because the timing had been way too good. Come on, the demon girl had pushed her way into my room right after I'd met with the detectives. She was a demon, after all. She wasn't human. It'd hardly take any effort for her to manipulate human hearts. I had no evidence to back that up, but conversely, there was no evidence that she wasn't a demon. In that case, the only way to survive was by presupposing the worst. Was there no one who would be my ally? All of them seemed like enemies. Everyone looked like one of the demon girl's underlings.
助けて。誰か助けてよ。
Why don't I have even a single ally? Why wouldn't anyone come save me? Why did I have to end up like this? I felt terribly forlorn, and I wanted some source of support. Someone who would protect me. Something that would protect me. I've been fine with anyone, so someone, please, extend a saving hand toward me. Suddenly, I thought of Fes's, Kishimoto Ayasu's face, and the words she had given voice to when we met at school. I'd been lost in my delusions, and I hadn't heard them, but Misumi had said the following. Find your sword. Finding your sword will save you.
剣。
If this were a game, I'd be a hero, and we'd reach the usual cliche development about my having to get my hands on a legendary sword to defeat the demon. Without my seeking it out, I'd recently heard the keyword sword from 2 different 3D girls. And there remained a chance that Fess was my ally, although, going by her attitude, Girl B, had she been called Senna, was most likely affiliated with the demon girl. A sword, huh?
剣だ。剣を手に入れるんだ。そうすれば。
I muttered to myself as though I'd gone off my rocker. For me, it was the equivalent of clutching at straws. If I got a sword, I might be released from this nightmare. I couldn't help having such expectations. It wasn't that I believed what Fess had said about it granting me salvation, but I lacked anything else to cling to. If nothing else, it'd be best to research this. I got down to running an online search immediately. For the moment, I started off by checking to see whether a sword similar to the one carried by Fess and Senna had appeared in any anime, but I couldn't spot anything like that in this season's crop of anime at least. I expected as much. I normally check out all the recent new anime. It could be a real handful, given that lately there could sometimes be 30 or 40 new shows in one season, but I watched the first episodes of all of them and then decided which to keep following. Of course, since there was MewTube, I didn't have any problem completing my lineup with anime from the BS and CS satellite subscription channels, which is why there was no way I'd overlooked any anime, and no such sword had appeared in any of the shows I'd checked. It was that distinctive looking. If it showed up, it ought to have caught my eye, but I had no memory of seeing one. Although I couldn't do anything about it if I'd seen it when I was being controlled by someone outside myself. Next, I tried running a search about the sword itself, rather than anime series.
くそ、ほとんどがゲームの攻略サイトじゃんか。
The terms I was closely familiar with, such as ESO's Shangri-La Edge, kept popping up. At this rate, I wouldn't make any progress. Even though I had to hurry up and find it. I had the sense that Senna had used a more concrete name when speaking of it, but what could it have been? Remember, your nightmare won't end unless you remember.
This sword.
Right, D-Sword. I quickly stuck it in the input field and ran a search. I got hits. Only 2 of them, though. Even so, I was gradually starting to think of these 2 links as my road to salvation. Holding down my excitement, I investigate them in order from top to bottom. Or from top down, rather. Yeah, the page is dead. Shit, what the hell? Toss it in the Wayback Machine. Maybe you'll find a version that still works. No, calm down. Go back one more time and take a look at the cache. There you go. The page included an illustration, a recreation based on how the sword was described in works of literature. Let's see. A sword of darkness unleashed upon the world and called D-Sword. A fictional sword first birthed in ancient Europe by the hand of the evil king Glajul. I don't know. It is said that as it was crafted to use humans' negative emotions as its nourishment, the Black Knights who bored and battled with it had their hearts eaten away by it in the end. It is also said that what distinguishes it from other holy swords and magical swords is the fact that it cannot be seen with one's eyes. When the unarmed knights raised their hands on high, a sharp wound would appear up on their opponent's arm, severing it and sending it falling to the ground. Before they experienced any pain. Ancient legends frequently include this type of setting in which one can surpass the physical laws of nature, and so the D-Sword, too, appears in many pseudepigrapha? I don't know, I got no idea. In other forms of literature. D-Sword is often thought of as being the equivalent of the Japanese kamitachi phenomenon. Kamitachi are imaginary spirits that have been depicted as weasels with razor-sharp sides instead of arms. However, this is what results when one faithfully follows how the people of the past envision them. If one were to describe them as... Can't read the rest of it.
元ネタは伝承か。
One faithfully follows how the people of the past envision this. One word to describe them in words, they are beings with a thin sense of reality to them, akin to spirits of the wind, but their existence has already been verified by modern science. It is a natural phenomenon that occurs in places where the air is extremely dry and the vacuum consequently produced cuts one's skin.
でも、セナって女が持ってたのに比べると、 こっちは随分地味だな。
In the first place, why was it such a minor sword? Why not go with Excalibur or Kusanagi, as something in the Major League? No, this wasn't the time to complain. Major or minor, it didn't matter as long as it could save me. I decided to explore a little more. Continuing, I clicked the second hit. The words, "I bought a D-sword," particularly concerned me. Was a D-sword something you could purchase? The blog's writer was apparently male, so I could deduce that he wasn't the demon girl or Senna. I don't know how you came to that conclusion. I mean, sure, it says sex equals man there, but that doesn't really mean anything. Let's see. I bought a sword. Seems like it's called D-sword. It's so sketchy, it's awesome. There aren't any other stores this weird and suspicious left in the capital metropolitan area except in Akiba. But Akiba's underground stores don't really suit my interest, because there's not really anything there except PC stuff and arrow books. That's not what I'm looking for. Shibuya used to have lots of underground stores too, saying this might give away my age, but they disappeared with the flow of time. That said, his level of energy was far too different from that of Shogun. Was he a completely unrelated third party, or had the person behind the blog deliberately changed the particulars of how he wrote? I understood that no answer would come no matter how much I thought about it, so I stopped looking at the blog. More importantly, it seemed that the stores he'd mentioned, the one called Town Vagabond, was located in Shibuya. Man, that period was amazing. Seriously, if you were to ask what was so amazing, well, it makes Town Vagabond, or not Vagabond, Vanguard. I don't know why the hell I was thinking Vagabond. Look like something for beginners. Anyhow, I'll let the nostalgia stop here. Even so, I'm curious about who christened it D-Sword, lol. I'll admit that it's pretty big and it's a well-made toy, but I can't think of why it came in stock at Town Vanguard, except maybe that it matches the taste of the storekeeper. Lately, he's turned part of the store into a corner for fantasy-related weapons. Plus, the ones on display are lightsabers and light shuriken. Obvious fake, so it's kind of disappointing. Although the light shuriken were so ridiculous that I bought them on impulse. Oh, and 2 comments. I had a feeling that it was too good to be true, but I also had a feeling that it was destiny. There was another way to look at it. It was precisely because this store was in Shibuya that I'd twice run into a girl holding a D-sword smack in the middle of Shibuya. Didn't I often hear about things that were secretly popular with various minority subcultures in Shibuya? I don't recall off the top of my head when this game takes place, and that blog post was 2007. Again, I think this is supposed to take place in 2008 or something, but I honestly cannot recall for the life of me. For now, I looked up Town Vanguard, but it didn't seem to have an official site. Instead, I found an image-based intro page on an online map. If they didn't have an official site, that meant they didn't take orders online. I searched taboo auctions, but didn't come across anything likely looking. I'm gonna guess that's like an eBay knockoff type thing. Which meant that my only option was to go to the store in person. I didn't want to go outside very much, but
剣は手に入れなくちゃ。手に入れないとダメなんだ。
now I had come to think of it as my sole absolute means of fighting back against the demon girl. I didn't know what I would do, in concrete terms, after obtaining the sword. I wasn't brave enough to use it to kill her or anything of the sort. Even so, I harbored the hope that if I got a sword, I would be somewhat freed from the terror that tortured me. Yeah, a D-sword was like a protective charm. It would surely strengthen my heart. Something about that sword strangely attracted me. At any rate, it seemed that this store was located near Cat Street. Cat Street is a twisty, winding road from Shibuya to Harajuku that runs about a block off Meiji Avenue. Apparently it had been built by filling in an area that was originally a stream. There were various explanations behind why it had originally come to be called Cat Street, such as there being many feral cats, or because it was the sort of narrow path that only cats would use. Well, not that it made much of a difference to me. Cat Street was fairly far away from me. By foot, it could easily take 15 or 20 minutes to get there. It'd be a quick trip by bike, but unfortunately, I didn't have one. I decided to go by a route that took me past the plaza in front of the station, and then past Shuto by way of cutting through Miyashita Park. Setting a quick pace, I crossed the overpass that went over Meiji Avenue. I'd finally arrived. Growing ever more impatient, I'd become irritated at the distance. Cat Street had been quiet compared to the big shopping district, and its image was far closer to that of Harajuku than Shibuya. The stores lined up there were all chic shops that, of course, had nothing to do with me, go off and die. Knowing that I was practically acting delirious as I walked along, I became even more annoyed. For me, being here was like playing an away game. All those bastards around me thought they were so damn cool, and there were more couples than in the shopping district. Whatever, they probably wanted to act like they had money, even though they didn't, so chances were that most of them were window shopping. What a waste of time. I felt some regret thinking to myself that I shouldn't have come after all, but I reminded myself that it was all for the sake of obtaining a sword and determinedly put up with it. Damn it, keep accidentally hitting right mouse button. For now, I went on having a staring contest with my map as I swiftly went along, rushing toward my destination while doing my best not to exchange looks with passerbys. Town Vanguard was deep within a narrow street side road that split off from Cat Street. Although I'd only ventured one side street away from the main road, the ambience underwent a dramatic change. It was a thin, narrow, dirty alley, one impossible for cars to pass through. On either side were wood-built residences and out-of-business stores with closed shutters, which invariably came equipped with spray-painted graffiti on them. Cat Street, which seemed so clean from the front with all its high-class brand-name stores, was in the end no more than a flimsy papier-mâché facade. Behind that facade lay any number of mercilessly discarded wrecks. Although I personally disliked both the front and the back, both were unfamiliar territory for me. The only place I ever wanted to go was ESO. Even so, Town Vanguard had a far smaller, darker air to it than I'd imagined. I started to understand why the blogger who had mentioned it had described it as an underground store. Despite the fact that an open sign had been hung up, you couldn't say it was doing brisk business even by way of flattery, and it was awfully hard to enter. How was I supposed to go in such a sketchy-seeming store when it was asking too much of me just to have me go alone to a gyudon shop? I want to go home. No, but I needed to get my hands on a sword no matter what. What was I supposed to do? I spent a little while going back and forth in front of the store. No one passed through this narrow alley. I had whiled away 30 minutes with my waffling, but not a single person had gone by me. I decided to brace myself and go on in, but then my courage failed me, causing me to abandon all hope, and I kept repeating this cycle innumerable times. But I couldn't go home empty-handed. This was the only place that I could obtain a D-sword. Even though I understood this with my head, my instincts made me reluctant to enter the shop. I imagined that maybe a clerk would come out for me. Of course, she'd be a cute maid, and she'd talk to me with the kind of voice you'd hear in anime. She'd have a perfect grasp of exactly what I wanted, and she'd hold a D-sword out to me in a wonderfully friendly manner. Here you are. Please take this sword, master. Get a hold of yourself. Chill out, me. It's just as I thought about how it'd be so much easier if only things would unfold in that way, a lone 3D girl appeared from within the store, as though my thoughts had reached her. Unlike in my fantasy, though, her clothes were rather gaudy, the kind of thing that made you wonder what kind of nomad camp she'd snagged them from, and her face, on the other hand, was amazingly glum. Her hair was Her hair was cut in the bomber head style with thin frizzy ends, and creepy patterns were drawn on the bandana twisted around it above. She said she was a store worker and had come out after seeing me wishy-washily going around outside. My fantasy hadn't exactly become reality. Well, that was to be expected. That's my timer going off. We'll go ahead and end this part here. I will see you all next time. A quick reminder that I do have a Patreon and a Discord. You can find links to those down below in the description. I do highly recommend that you join the Discord so you can stay updated on channel happenings, because that is my go-to place for posting about not being able to record or stream or whatever the case may be. So yeah. And as for the Patreon, that is the easiest and best way to support the channel if you find yourself enjoying the content on it. For as little as $1 a month, you can get early access to all of my videos. But that'll be it for this video. Like I said, I will see you all next time. But until then, a goodbye and farewell.